your Bibles to Philippians 1 if you have them. I have to tell you that I have dreaded preaching this all week. That excites you, I know. You're like, okay, what do we need to put our seatbelts on for? I'll tell you why. Because I don't feel really qualified to preach this. I never feel qualified to preach this. Nevertheless, today, I feel particularly unqualified to preach this. And I think that it's something that is difficult for us to perhaps hear, difficult for us to put into practice. Very, very difficult for us to put into practice. But I got to tell you, I'm so grateful for Spirit-led worship, because after hearing the songs that we just sang and participating in the worship, talking about God as our salvation and you're my life and you're everything and it is well with my soul, all of these things help me to realize how very, very important this message is. Because my job is not just to encourage you, it is to prepare you. My job as the preaching pastor is to step on toes when necessary and to say, you know what, if you get your feelings hurt, I'm sorry, but if it makes you turn to Jesus, I'm not sorry. So it's that sorry, not sorry thing. And so today, I want us to look at what Paul is dealing with in this passage and how we are prepared for everything that we just sang. And I'm talking about an unstoppable hope. An unstoppable hope. How do we experience unstoppable hope that feeds unstoppable joy? Hopefully it'll be clear. And I got to fly through this, so you are going to have to buckle up your seatbelts, because I'm going to have to move to get all of this out. But I think it's extremely important, and just prayerfully listen and participate in your active listening and processing and praying and God, what do you want us to do? Because here's the thing. When I ask the question, how can we experience unstoppable hope that feeds unstoppable joy? I don't think that we can, as long as we continue to be American Christians. I'm not saying move off somewhere. I'm saying deal with what we have to deal with while we're here. And the reason I say that is because I believe that the American way of life is wired to prevent it. That's not an original thought with me, but I think it is a real, accurate thought. The truth is, we're just too comfortable. All of us. Every one of us. We're too comfortable. How was Paul able to experience such joy in his life through the suffering and loss of all things? I think that the answer is that he suffered the loss of all things. Chapter 3, verse 8 tells us. I think he dealt with that. And he voluntarily suffered the loss of all things once he got a taste of Christ. That was the determiner. That's what changed everything in his life. He had a life of relative ease, right? As a Pharisee who was in all the right circles and knew all the right stuff and had all the right privileges and all the right education and all of that. He was the persecutor, not the persecutee, the one persecuted. He was the guy who did it, not the guy who received it. But he counted it all as garbage in knowing Christ. Did you do that? Can you say that? I can't. Most of the people that I know can't. Most of the pastors that I know can't. We can't say that. We don't want to. So I'm going to ask you a question to get us started here. Would you be any different? Would your reaction to Jesus be any different than the rich young ruler that we feel so sorry for? You know the story? Young guy who came up to Jesus and he said, hey, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And so Jesus goes through this litany of keeping the law and all of this, because he knew where the young man was coming from. Because the guy came back to me and said, you know what, I've done all that since I was a kid. That's what we're trained to do. That's what we do as Jews. And Jesus said, yeah, but one thing you lack. Go and sell everything you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. And he walked away sadly because he was very rich. Now, if you will be honest, let's look at that for ourselves in that place. Would we respond any differently? Probably not. Why? Because we have been groomed into a particular rich man's faith. American Christianity. It's what we know. And I'm going to deal with that a little bit later. And I'm going to tell you up front, because you're going to hear some quotes that are not me, and usually I try to mix them up with a different one guy. Because I really needed to go to somebody who had dealt with this more than I have, who's been farther down the road than I have, who's wrestled with what this topic means. And so I referenced Pastor John Piper. His whole ministry is related around this. And so I listened to one of his sermons this week, especially toward the end. You're going to hear a lot of Piper content, because I listened to a sermon that just wrecked me, honestly. And if you were around my family, you probably, saw me like, okay, I gotta go take a walk. I'll be back, Because it's like, what do I do with all this? I don't know how to process this. It's outside of my wheelhouse. Because we don't think like this. And so I will try to work through this. And as I'm, spilling it out to you, I'm still in process. Working through this, trying to meditate on it. See, I read a man in Philippians who experienced more joy than most of us have ever experienced, and he was in a Roman prison. How are you sitting in a Roman prison, which is not the Holiday Inn or better, it's just a 2-star these days? How can you do that and experience the kind of joy that this guy had? How do you do that? He said, I rejoice, and I'll continue to rejoice because of this. And then he goes on to tell us that Christ is proclaimed because of my imprisonment, and that will lead to my vindication as I remain faithful through the trials by means of the prayers that I'm asking for and am receiving through the power of Christ. That's what he's talking about here. That's what he says. Paul has an unstoppable hope that goes beyond getting out of prison, because he makes really clear that he might not. He's not sure that he will. In 20, he says, look, whether I live or die, this is what I want to see happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to live, I don't know what's going to die. And he wants out of prison. But does he want out of prison because he's uncomfortable? And I'm sure he was, whatever it was. He wanted, probably wanted some more comfort than he had. Is it because he wanted comfort? Because, I hadn't had pizza in a while. And I'm just dying to have some pizza. Let me out of here. That's not what he was out. That's not what it's about. He never praised that. Read it again. What was his motivation? For vindication. For salvation in the CSB, it says. But to be vindicated. What was his motivation? So that Christ will be honored and that he can experience a more fruitful ministry among the Philippians. I get that from the second part of 20. I get it from verses 24 and 25. And I got to be honest with you, I prayed a whole lot for my relief, for the sake of my relief. I prayed, Lord, get me out of this just because I don't want to be in this. Not for any motive that Paul is talking about. And I'm not railing against praying that. Because Paul himself, he does that too. He says in 2 Corinthians 12, as he came to realize that the suffering he was given, and he was given what he called a thorn in the flesh, a messenger from Satan, depending on which translation you read. So he was sent this messenger in the flesh because there was a danger that he would swell up with pride because he had been given so much revelation. He had been entrusted with the revelation of Christ. He was entrusted with the gospel. And so he was at risk of becoming prideful, as we all are when we swell up in knowledge or whatever it is. And he says that he was told by God that it was for his protection. So request denied. Boom, boom, right? Request denied. God said to him, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect. My power is made perfect. That's actually a pretty big statement. My power is made perfect in weakness. So Paul, what does he say? How does he react? I'm going to boast in my weakness then. Okay, I get it, God. I'm going to boast in my weakness because when I am weak, then I'm strong. That kind of strength is the basis for unstoppable hope leading to unstoppable joy. That's it right there. And so he gives these motivations here in verse 20. He gives it in a negative way and then in a positive way. If we look at this, the way he expresses it. So first he expresses it as a negative motivation, which is a desire not to be ashamed about anything. That's it. When you put that not in there, it's like, I don't want to be that. So it's a negative thing that he doesn't want to do, which is a positive move in his direction. So he does not want to be ashamed about anything. And I got to tell you, that for me, this sounds a little odd for somebody who's in prison. Right? And I know that we understand that he is in prison for the gospel, but if you're in prison, don't you feel shame at that? I mean, you have a tendency to go, what are they going to say about me now? But he knew what everybody was saying about him. And so it was not good. There were some of the Christians who were slandering him because of it. So shouldn't he already feel ashamed? But the truth is, he didn't care what people thought about it because he had a kingdom mindset. When you have a kingdom mindset and you're God-focused and what everything horizontal, what people think, it just doesn't make any difference. Beloved, I think it's Eleanor Roosevelt this was attributed to. You won't worry nearly so much about what other people think of you if you realize just how seldom they actually do. But even when they do, if you're Christ-focused, then it's not going to matter so much what other people think. That's Romans 1:16, he said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and also to the Greek. So he's not interested in this passage here. It's not that he wants his reputation to be vindicated so that they'll think he's cool. He wants to be vindicated as an apostle for the sake of the gospel. And this leads to the positive motivation, which is a desire for Christ to be highly honored in his body and life or death. And he knew that that was going to take great courage. He knew that wasn't going to be easy. He knew that it was going to take a supernatural power. So he says, I'm asking you to join with me to pray that I will do this with courage, that Christ will be highly exalted in my body, whether in life or death. He knew he might be facing death. And so he knew that it was going to be the power of Christ through the prayers of the saints that were going to give him the courage to stand. Because he loved Jesus and he wanted him to be pleased, it led him to embrace what Jesus said in Matthew 16. That if anyone would follow after me, if anyone, that includes us by the way, would follow after me, let him deny himself, take his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will find it. For what will it benefit someone if he gains the whole world and yet loses his life? Or what will anyone give in exchange for his life? John Piper said this, what you love determines what you feel shame about. If you love for men to think highly of you, you'll feel horrible shame when they don't. But if you love for men to think highly of Christ, you'll feel shame when they belittle him on your account. That's why Paul would say just a few verses later, verse 27, hey, just one thing. As citizens of heaven, live your life worthy of the gospel of Christ. And that's the big question that I think we have to answer is how do we live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ? How can we have this attitude that Paul had in his life, in his living, in his hardships? I think the key is in how he stated his highest value. We've talked about the highest value for a couple of weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks now. And he stated it, that Christ will be highly honored in my body. And then there's that little phrase there, whether by life or by death. So again, we're going to ask the question, can you say that? Do you have that attitude that I just want Christ to be honored in me, highly honored in me, in my body, in my flesh, whether by life or by death. In my living and in my dying, I want Christ to be honored. Can you say that? It's more difficult if you believe it. I can all say, hey, repeat after me, and we can all say it. But meaning it is so much deeper and so much more difficult. Can you read the verse 21? For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain, and say, yeah, that's me too. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. That's me. That's where I am. So I want us to look at this, the living and the dying. All right, we're going to look at the living first. Living for Christ. What is that? What does it mean to live for Christ? I think living for Christ is to say that everything I do is for the glory of Christ. And if you think about that, doesn't that sound a little extreme? Everything I do is to the glory of Christ. And you can kind of take that and run with it and go, dude, you're crazy. Or if you're not crazy, that's at least impossible to do. And I would say, yes, I agree with you. It's hard and it sounds, all right, so really am I going to live every moment of every day for the glory of Christ? But if it is extreme and it is crazy, then what do we do in Scripture like 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do all to the glory of Christ. And I kind of look at all, and maybe I've got a tight definition on this, but when I say all, I see everything. When I see all, I don't see much that's being removed from that. When it's all, it's kind of all. All right, I know we live in a crazy world where we live in with contradictions. All means all to you, but it doesn't mean all to me. But let's just go with all meaning everything. Let's go traditional here. We're going old school. All means all. All means everything. And it means that in every part of my life, I have a God-mindedness. A God-mindedness. That in everything I want to do every day, I want to have a God-mindedness. I want to focus my life so much on who God is that I focus on Him and I do this, live out my life saturated with a consciousness that says in everything I do, privately and publicly, I want to honor Jesus. Do you have that? Do you ever go through a day and at least just say once, I want to do this to the Lord of Christ? Because I think that's a little test that we can take real quickly. To say, how God-minded am I? Do I ever ask, is Jesus going to be honored in this? When I'm making a decision, be either small or great, do I ever say, hey, is this going to honor Jesus in my life? And I don't know that we're wired that way. But I think we need to be rewired that way. I think we need to start that process saying, you know what? I want to live a God-minded life. I want to live a life that brings honor to Jesus so that in everything I do, I'm living for Christ. Because really, when are we off the clock? At what point during the day or night is it okay to say, you know what? I'm good now. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I don't care if it honors Jesus. It's not really who we are. It's not how we're made. It sounds a little fanatical, maybe, a little crazy. Do you know what? I know a lot of people who are fanatical about politics. I mean, rabid. You know what I'm talking about? You know the people where you talk to them and everything goes to politics? Every problem in the world is a political problem. It's like party line, whichever party you're for, it's like everything's here. All my conversation, always, it doesn't matter what you talk about. It always seems to go to politics or a politician. And those rallies, man, the political rallies that happen for candidates, crazy people. Seriously, man, crazy people. They're wearing funny stuff they would never wear out in public anywhere else. And how about sports? Because I know some sports guys, man, they talk sports 24/7. A lot of sports stations are sports 24/7. I mean, it's real. It's a real thing, you know. They know the stats of every player on their team. They know the name, they know the background, favorite color, they know how many passes they caught, how many receptions were made under drought, all of the things. They just know it. And then they know all of the stats about every other team. And every conversation kind of comes back to sports. Ever been to a football game? Crazy? Crazy people? Fun? I'm on a, and I go to a football game, what? And then until, you know, something like Tennessee happens, and I'm like, I need to try to drink of water on that one. Hang on. But we look, and it's 10 degrees below zero. And you people bundled up. And then there's always that row with about 8 guys with no shirts on, with letters painted on their chest. Right? I mean, you go to a football game, it is a religion of fanatics. It's like going to, you know, a charismatic church. No, I'm going to go worse than that. Because I'm not the charismaniac, where it's just like, what? And there's no order whatsoever. And we're okay with that. So let's not get too crazy in worship with Jesus, huh? We'll go to a football game on Saturday and then come in church on Sunday and sing about the Lord is my salvation, and it's like, find it easy to get excited about a political party or a football team and not so much about Jesus. I think it's because our priorities are so screwed up. And Jesus is not our highest value. We've put too much of our hope in a politician rather than Jesus. Why? Because politicians protect our American way of life, our dreams for the future. And we will openly fight to protect that because we can't stand the thought of having to suffer without. So when you start threatening my rights, you start threatening my dreams and my hopes, and I'm fighting with that, and I'm going to stand behind whatever politician will get my stuff done. That's who we are. John Piper said this: the wealthier our nation gets, the lower our tolerance for suffering. It lowers our pain threshold. Our country is wired to unfit you to be a Christian. America is designed to help you fulfill your dream of wealth and ease, not suffering and loss. And if we're going to develop an unstoppable hope, then we have to embrace suffering. We have to. That is a part of our responsibility, is to prepare you for suffering, because you will suffer. Many of you are suffering and have suffered. It is a part of it. Piper goes on to say that without suffering, you won't magnify the power of God, you won't magnify the love of God, and you won't get the Great Commission done without it. It won't happen. Suffering is appointed as our normal lot in this age, and as the specific strategy for finishing the Great Commission. Is he right? Well, as I listened to him, he gave some pretty compelling evidences. Let me share them with you. Luke chapter 10, verse 3. Now go, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. One of the comments made was, you know what happens when lambs go among wolves? Lambs get eaten up. Lambs in the midst of wolves get destroyed. He pointed out that on the cross, Jesus was slaughtered by wolves at Calvary. And then he tells us, go, do likewise. Go and make disciples. Matthew chapter 24, verse 9. And they will hand you over to be persecuted, and they will kill you. You will be hated by all nations because of my name. Acts 14:22. Paul and the others were strengthening the disciples by encouraging them to continue in the faith, by telling them it is necessary, not optional, he says it is necessary to go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. 1 Thessalonians 2-3, and we sent Timothy, our brother and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you concerning your faith, so that no one will be shaken by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we are appointed to this. 1 Peter 4:12, dear friends, don't be surprised when the fiery ordeal comes among you to test you, as if something unusual were happening to you. Instead, rejoice as you share in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may also rejoice with great joy when His glory is revealed. And finally, 2 Timothy 3:12. In fact, all who want to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. Piper said this is normal. America is abnormal. Beware of living here, he says. It is the most dangerous place to raise kids today. We're so saturated with this culture of ease and comfort and escape and retirement and entertainment that New Testament Christianity is unintelligible by large. This is a dangerous place to raise kids because we teach them how to be comfortable and avoid suffering at all costs. And yet we all know that it's through suffering that we tend to grow the most. So are we doing our kids a favor when we protect them from everything in the world? And we give them everything that they want? Are we being fair to them, just to them, loving to them? Because we live in a fallen world, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen where they fall apart, or where they say, you know what, Jesus has got me in this. We need to raise our kids so that it's the latter and not the former. So that they're not destroyed by the trials that will come their way. We can only break this stream of life in here in America by embracing suffering. And I tell you, I'm having to reevaluate some of the stuff I'm dealing with. You know, when I've got neck issues, I got lower back issues, and I'm always like, I gotta, get me out of this. Because I hate this pain, man. I hate dealing with this. I hate being limited. It's like, I'm still praying, God, if you'll deliver this, that would be great. But do I need to reassess this? I mean, is God protecting my inner man through the breakdown of the outer man? That's biblical. 2 Corinthians 4. Therefore we do not give up, even though our outer person is being destroyed, our inner person is being renewed day by day. For our momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable eternal weight of glory. So we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. How are we viewing the trials and the struggles and the pains that we're dealing with? Whether it's wearing glasses or getting arthritis or whatever it is. It's got to be magnified through your weakness. So let's go back. Verse 20, he said, my eager expectation is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now as always, with all courage, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. So let's talk about that dying part. How does Christ get glorified in our dying? How is he glorified in that? And I think the answer is found in verse 21. Verse 21, by experiencing death as gain. For me to live as Christ, to die is gain. So for us to experience death as gain, then we can glorify Christ in our dying. Well, how do we do that? Verse 23. I long to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Which is far better. Because He is life. Then I can hold on to the key, which is believing that Christ is better than life. Because He is life. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Jesus is better than life? Do you think that Jesus is better than your family? Better than your career? Better than sports? Better than politics? Better than sunshine and oceans and mountains? Is He worth giving up all of that for Himself? This is hard for us because this is all we've ever experienced. But the Bible tells us that this broken down world cannot compare to what Christ has in store for us. 1 Corinthians 2:9 says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, nor the heart of man imagined what God has prepared for those who love Him. And if you need just a taste of what's to come, I just want to encourage you to read a book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn. And it can help shape your view of just what's coming as he takes a biblical perspective on what heaven might be like. For us to have an unstoppable hope that lasts for eternity, Christ has to be more beautiful in our lives than anything else. And anything, let's go old school, anything means anything, right? Christ is glorified in your dying when you consider dying as gain, because Christ is more valuable than everything you lose in your dying. And here is a reality, hard truth. You lose everything in your dying. You lose everything. You love your family. You love your home. You love Chattanooga. You love your job. You love, your bank account. Whatever it is. You love that. You die, and if you die today, it's gone. You lose it all. There's no holding on to that. So all that's left is Jesus. Unless you don't know Him. And if you don't know Him, then you lose it all without hope. So you need to trust in Jesus today, man. He is the only hope. But is He enough? Is He more satisfying than anything else? We don't like this idea of giving up, but it's going to happen. So we're going to end with a little test here. A little test. So in your mind, you don't have time to write it down, but in your mind, I want you to have two columns. And I had to take this test, and it stunk, man. I got to tell you, it's hard. That Piper guy. Anyway. In the left column, I want you to think about all the things that you love and value, all the things that are important to you, all the things that you love about this life. Put them all down. Start listening. Let me see. I want to see your brain working. Move your eyes, make it look like you're thinking. Okay, all the things in your left column, the things that you love about this life. In the right column, I want you to write one thing. Jesus. Okay, so play along here. Let's take your little magic marker and you put a big X across everything in the left column. You're still going to be able to rejoice because you've got Christ. You're still going to be able to say, praise God. If God takes away everything that you have, will you still worship Him? if God takes away what you have, are you still going to worship and praise Him? You going to become bitter? He's got to take it from you. Job had everything taken away from him. And he rightly, it was, if you read Job, man, God started that. Even with Satan, God started it today. You consider my servant Job. We go through the whole story, we see that God had a big old blessing for Job through this process. But Job, when he saw that everything was taken away, he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I was listening to this sermon, Piper reminded me of an article that I had read years later. Now, the sermon I'm referring to, I challenge you to listen to it. If you want it, Tori's will have access to it. She'll have access to this article that I'm about to share with you. But it reminded me of an article that was written in 1996 by Steve Saint. Steve Saint, the son of Nate Saint. Nate Saint, one of the 5 that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, who were in Ecuador trying to reach this unreached people group of this tribe of Indians, and they were killed on a beach. Little beach that they would leave gifts for and start interacting with them that they call Palm Beach. And so Steve Saint, many years later, if I remember, if memory serves, he was actually a young child. He was there, not at the beach, so he goes back years later, and he just wants to find out the details of this. He's like, I want to talk to this, because others went back, they were inspired, they went back, and this tribe they came to know Jesus, they were changed. And so he's interviewing some of the people who killed his father. Some of the men who speared his father to death. He's talking to them. And he's just like, what happened? What was going through your mind? What were the circumstances that were involved? And as he hears this story put together, he's just like, this does not make sense. It is not making sense. The article is called, Did They Have to Die? It's Christianity Today, 1996. Did they have to die? And that's the question that he asks. Did they have to die? Was it something, could it have been avoided? And as he goes through the story, he realizes they should not have died. All of the circumstances, it should have never happened that what happened on that beach happened. And he came to a conclusion in one sentence in this, and he says this, it occurred to me how incredibly unlikely it was that the Palm Beach killing took place at all. It is an anomaly that I cannot explain outside of divine intervention. Do you hear what he just said? Let's just strip it down and take all the spirituality out of it for a second. He's saying, God killed my dad. That's the implication. Divine intervention led to this. Now, what does Nate Saint do? Steve Saint do with this? Does he go, how can he do that? He's an evil God. He's terrible. He's horrible. No, he worships him. He worships him because he's seen what God has done. And he knows that his dad, like those other men, said, look, we'll lay our lives down. We'll give our lives if they will come to know Jesus through the gospel. And that's what happened, because these men, their highest value was that Jesus was honored in their living and in their dying. And you can't look at that and not say Jesus was honored and people's lives were saved because they died on a beach that should have never happened except for divine intervention. That happens to you. You still going to worship Jesus? You still going to honor Him? Most of you probably know that this week, the rapper and singer Toby Mac lost his 21-year-old son. And as I heard about that as the father of 2 boys, it shook my world. He had been to his son's concert, who was an aspiring musician himself, left to go to a concert in Canada, received word that his son had died during the night, just died in bed, 21 years old. And you think, man, how do you deal with that? And yet, he put out a statement, perhaps you've read, and it concludes with this. He says, my wife and I want the world to know this. We don't follow God because we have some sort of under-the-table deal with Him, like, we'll follow you if you bless us. We follow God because we love Him. It's our honor. He is the God of the hills and the valleys, and He is beautiful above all things. Toby Mack just said that God is more beautiful than his 21-year-old son. God is more valuable to me than my firstborn child. I think that's weighty. I think that demonstrates somebody who has elevated God above all things and says, whatever happens, even as I am crushed under the weight of knowing that my son has died, I will praise him. I will worship him. I will follow him. I don't do that because of what he gives me. I do that because of who he is and because I love him. And I think that right there is the key. Toby Mack's family did not decide in the moment of hearing about their child's death why they would praise Jesus through the hard times. They didn't decide when he heard news, your son is dead. Oh, then we got to figure out, are we going to serve Jesus still? Because it had already been decided. It doesn't happen usually in the moment. Yes, God's grace is there in the moment that you need it. When you need it, it shows up. Because God is like that. His grace is sufficient in weakness. His power is demonstrated in weakness. But it's not going to happen usually in that time. It is not going to happen in the moment you need it, but you're going to spend your life determining who you're going to serve. And then here's the truth. If we spend our lives building our dream lives and chasing after all the bells and the whistles of life, and then think that we're going to be prepared for suffering, it's not going to happen. Because when that happens, when you have built your life on everything but Jesus, and there's a mirror right here. If you're building your life on everything but Jesus, then when the loss comes, you're not going to be focused on Jesus, you're going to be focused on everything you've just lost. You're going to be focusing on, oh my, the world has fallen apart around me, not Jesus. But if we focus, if we're going to be different, and we're going to say, I'm going to serve Jesus above all things, and He's going to be my primary objective. He's going to be my focus, so that even as I'm doing things in the world, man, they're secondary. I can suffer the loss of all those things. And if I do, and a big old X comes across that column, I got Jesus, praise Him, I will serve Him, I will honor Him because He is worthy of it. Are you going to be different? Are we going to be different? You're going to follow Jesus because the time to determine if you are going to follow Christ is right now. It's right now. I'm not talking about 2 hours from now, right now. Because you don't know what's going to happen in 2 hours. You don't know what's going to happen on the way home from this place. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week. You don't know that, but you've got right now. You're going to have to decide, am I going to follow Jesus above all things in my life? And when you walk out that door, it doesn't matter if you choose to or not, you will have chosen. You will have chosen. So you're going to decide right now.